Sarah Martinez had always been the type of woman who never backed down from a challenge. Growing up in a rough neighborhood in Detroit, she learned early that life would hit hard, and the only choice was to hit back harder. Her father worked double shifts at the auto plant, while her mother cleaned offices downtown, both sacrificing everything to give their daughter opportunities they never had. When Sarah graduated high school with honors, everyone expected her to take the college scholarship and pursue a safe career. Instead, she shocked her family by announcing she was joining the Navy. Not just joining, she wanted to become a SEAL. The recruiter had laughed at first, explaining that women weren't allowed in SEAL teams. Sarah's response was simple: then change the rules. It took years of legal battles, congressional hearings, and public pressure. But eventually the doors cracked open. Sarah was among the first women ever allowed to attempt SEAL training. The odds were stacked impossibly high. Less than 20% of male candidates made it through. And she would be facing not just the physical and mental challenges, but the additional weight of proving that women belonged in special operations. The training was everything she expected and worse. Hell Week pushed her body beyond what she thought possible. Instructors who opposed her presence made every exercise harder, every mistake more costly. She carried logs twice her weight through freezing surf, endured interrogation training that left her questioning her own sanity, and pushed through obstacle courses that seemed designed to break her spirit. Her teammates were a mixed group. Some respected her determination and treated her as an equal. Others saw her as a political statement, a quota to fill, and made their resentment clear through small acts of sabotage, hiding her gear, excluding her from informal study groups, or making comments just loud enough for her to hear about how she was weakening their unit. Marcus Thompson, a fellow trainee from Alabama, was the worst of them. A natural athlete with a military family background, he had expected to cruise through training and saw Sarah's presence as a threat to the brotherhood he had dreamed of joining since childhood. He led the faction that wanted her gone, orchestrating pranks and psychological pressure designed to make her quit. But Sarah endured everything they threw at her. When they filled her boots with sand before a 10-mile run, she emptied them and finished in the top 5. When they questioned her ability to carry a wounded teammate, she proved it by hauling Marcus himself through a combat simulation when he twisted his ankle. Gradually, even some of her harshest critics began to respect her tenacity. The final phase of training was maritime operations, underwater demolition, shipboarding, and deep-sea navigation. This was where Sarah truly excelled. Years of swimming competitively had given her an advantage in the water that even the strongest male candidates couldn't match. She moved through underwater obstacle courses like a dolphin, completed breath-holding exercises that left instructors amazed, and demonstrated an intuitive understanding of ocean currents that came from growing up near the Great Lakes. As graduation approached, Sarah felt the dream within reach. She had survived everything the Navy could throw at her, earned the grudging respect of most of her class, and proven to herself that she belonged among America's elite warriors. The ceremony was scheduled for a Friday morning, with families flying in from across the country to witness their sons and daughters join the most exclusive military unit in the world. But that Thursday evening, everything changed. Sarah was called into the commanding officer's office, expecting perhaps a final briefing or congratulations. Instead, she found herself facing a panel of senior officers with grim expressions. Captain Reynolds, who had overseen her training, avoided eye contact as he delivered the news that would shatter her world. "Candidate Martinez," he began slowly, "it has come to our attention that there are concerns about your psychological fitness for special operations." Sarah's blood turned cold. "Sir, I've passed every evaluation." "My scores." "This isn't about scores," interrupted Commander Walsh, a woman Sarah had hoped would be an ally. "We've received reports from multiple sources about concerning behavior, aggression toward fellow candidates, emotional instability, and questions about your ability to function as part of a team. The accusations were devastating and mostly fabricated." Yes, she had argued with Marcus and his group, but only in response to their harassment. Yes, she had shown intense determination, but that was what SEAL training was supposed to develop. The multiple sources were clearly the same group of candidates who had opposed her from the beginning, now making one final attempt to eliminate her. Furthermore, Captain Reynolds continued. There are concerns about the precedent your graduation would set. The integration of women into SEAL teams requires absolute certainty that candidates can meet not just the minimum standards, but the highest possible standards. Any doubt reflects on the program as a whole. Sarah realized she was being held to an impossible standard, not just succeeding, but succeeding so perfectly that no one could question the decision. A single complaint, even unfounded, was being used to justify what they had probably planned all along. This is political, she said quietly. You're not evaluating my performance. You're caving to pressure. Candidate Martinez, Captain Reynolds stood up. You have served with distinction, but the decision is final. You will not graduate with your class. However, the Navy values your service, and we're prepared to offer you an honorable discharge with full benefits and a glowing recommendation for civilian employment. Sarah stared at the panel, feeling years of sacrifice and pain crumble into dust. She had given everything, her relationships, her financial security, her physical and mental health, chasing a dream that had always been designed to remain just out of reach. The men who had made her life hell would graduate tomorrow while she packed her bags in disgrace. I need to think about this, she managed to say. Of course. Take the weekend. Report back Monday with your decision. Sarah walked out of that office in a daze. She passed the barracks where her former classmates were celebrating their upcoming graduation, heard Marcus's voice loud among them, probably already spreading the news that the experiment had failed. She kept walking until she reached the beach, where she had spent so many hours in training, and sat alone on the sand as darkness fell. Everything she had worked for was gone. The Navy was offering her a way out that would preserve her dignity on paper, but she knew the truth would follow her forever. She would be remembered as the woman who almost made it, who proved that integration was premature, who confirmed every stereotype about female weakness. As waves crashed against the shore, Sarah Martinez faced the hardest decision of her life. She could accept the discharge, take the benefits, and try to build some kind of normal life from the wreckage of her dreams. Or she could fight a battle she was almost certain to lose, knowing that failure would destroy not just her future but potentially close the door for other women who might follow. The next morning, she would have to choose between survival and principle, between the safe path and the impossible one. But tonight, she sat alone in the darkness, feeling more defeated than she had ever felt in her life, while the waves whispered that some dreams were never meant to come true. Monday morning came too soon. Sarah had spent the weekend in her small apartment off base, staring at the ceiling and wrestling with a decision that felt impossible. Her phone had buzzed constantly with calls from family members who had heard rumors, reporters who smelled a story, and military lawyers who offered to represent her if she chose to fight. She ignored them all. When she finally reported to Captain Reynolds' office, Sarah's mind was made up. She walked in wearing her dress uniform, every ribbon and badge perfectly positioned, her posture straight and eyes forward. The same panel of officers waited for her. But this time, she noticed something different in their expressions. Perhaps a hint of hope that she would take the easy way out. Candidate Martinez, Captain Reynolds began. Have you made your decision regarding our offer? Sarah looked each officer in the eye before responding. Sir, I respectfully decline the discharge offer. I believe the accusations against me are false and politically motivated. I request a formal review board and the opportunity to defend my record. The silence that followed was deafening. Commander Walsh shifted uncomfortably in her chair while Captain Reynolds's jaw tightened. They had clearly expected her to disappear quietly, allowing them to close this chapter without further controversy. Candidate Martinez, he said slowly, I strongly advise against this course of action. A formal review will require testimony from your classmates, detailed examination of training incidents, and media attention that could be damaging to your future career prospects. The discharge offer allows you to leave with honor. Sir, with respect, honor isn't something that can be offered. It's something that's earned. I've earned my place in this program, and I won't walk away because it's convenient for others. What followed was a bureaucratic nightmare that tested Sarah's resolve in ways that SEAL training never had. The review board process dragged on for weeks, during which she was placed on administrative hold, unable to graduate with her class but forbidden from leaving base. She watched Marcus and the others receive their tridents and assignments while she lived in limbo, studying regulations and preparing for hearings. The media attention was intense and largely hostile. Conservative commentators used her case as evidence that political correctness was destroying military readiness. Liberal supporters tried to make her a symbol of female empowerment, which she found equally uncomfortable. Everyone wanted to speak for her, but few bothered to ask what she actually wanted. Her family flew out from Detroit for the first hearing. Her mother, Maria, had taken time off from work she couldn't afford to lose, while her father, Roberto, looked uncomfortable in his only suit. They sat in the back of the hearing room as Sarah faced a new panel of officers. This one, including representatives from Washington, who clearly wanted the whole situation to disappear. The hearing revealed the depth of the conspiracy against her. Marcus Thompson testified that Sarah had threatened him during training, claiming she had said she would make him pay for opposing her. Other classmates corroborated stories about her aggressive behavior and inability to work as part of a team, but Sarah's lawyer, a Navy JAG officer named Lieutenant Commander Jennifer Hayes, had done her homework. She presented evidence of the systematic harassment Sarah had endured. Emails between classmates discussing ways to break her. Incident reports that had been mysteriously filed after the fact, and testimony from instructors who had witnessed the sabotage. The irony, Lieutenant Commander Hayes stated during closing arguments, is that candidate Martinez has demonstrated exactly the qualities we want in a Navy SEAL. When faced with impossible odds and systematic opposition, she didn't break, she didn't quit, she adapted and overcame. The question isn't whether she's fit to be a SEAL, it's whether we're fit to have her. The review board's decision was split and ultimately unsatisfying for everyone. They found insufficient evidence to support the most serious accusations against Sarah, but ruled that the disruption caused by her presence had created an unacceptable training environment. She was offered a compromise, transfer to another military occupational specialty with full rank and benefits, or separation from the Navy. Sarah rejected both options and appealed to the next level. The months that followed were the darkest of her life. The appeal process meant more hearings, more testimony, more public scrutiny. Her savings were depleted by legal fees despite having military counsel. The stress affected her family. Her father suffered a minor heart attack that she was convinced was related to the pressure, while her mother aged years in months. Marcus Thompson, meanwhile, had graduated and was already serving with a SEAL team in the Middle East. Photos of him in action appeared in military publications, living the dream that Sarah felt had been stolen from her. The symbolism was crushing while she fought bureaucratic battles in hearing rooms. He was living the life she had trained for. But slowly, things began to change. Other women who had been inspired by Sarah's initial acceptance into SEAL training began speaking out about their own experiences with military discrimination. A congressional subcommittee announced hearings on gender integration in special operations. Most importantly, 3 female Marines successfully completed the grueling infantry officer course, proving that Sarah's achievements weren't an anomaly. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, one of Sarah's toughest instructors during training, requested permission to testify on her behalf. His testimony was devastating to her opponents. "I've been training SEALs for 15 years, he told the appeals board. "I've seen tough guys break down crying, and I've seen average people do extraordinary things when pushed. Martinez wasn't the strongest candidate I've trained, or the fastest, or the smartest. But she was the most determined. When everyone else wanted her to fail, she found ways to succeed. That's exactly what we need in special operations." He went on to describe specific incidents where Sarah had excelled her performance during the underwater navigation exercise, her leadership during team challenges, and most importantly, her behavior toward teammates who had treated her badly. She carried Marcus Thompson for 2 miles when he injured his ankle, even though he had been making her life hell for weeks. That's not aggression or poor teamwork. That's exactly the character we're supposed to be developing. The appeals board's final decision came down on a Friday afternoon in March, almost 6 months after Sarah should have graduated. Lieutenant Commander Hayes called with the news that the board had ruled in Sarah's favor. The original decision was overturned, and she would be allowed to complete her training. But victory came with conditions that showed how little had really changed. She would have to repeat the final month of training with a new class, undergo additional psychological evaluation, and accept assignment to a specially created position that would keep her out of direct combat roles initially. Sarah accepted the conditions without hesitation. After everything she had endured, the chance to earn her trident was worth any compromise. She called her parents with the news, and for the first time in months, she heard her mother cry tears of joy instead of frustration. The return to training was surreal. The new class of candidates knew her story, and she was treated as something between a celebrity and a cautionary tale. Some instructors pushed her harder than ever, perhaps hoping she would still wash out. Others seemed to bend over backward to appear fair, which created its own problems. But Sarah had learned something during her months of legal battles. She was stronger than she had ever imagined. The young woman who had been devastated by the panel's decision was gone, replaced by someone who understood that earning respect was different from demanding it, and that true victory sometimes required losing everything first. On graduation day, she stood with her new class as they received their tridents. Her parents sat in the front row, her father looking proud despite the stress that had aged him, her mother holding a small American flag. When Captain Reynolds, who had fought her every step of the way, pinned the golden trident to her uniform, Sarah felt something she had never experienced before. Not triumph or vindication, but something quieter and deeper. She had proven that dreams could survive, even when the system was designed to destroy them. She had shown that sometimes the most important battles were fought not in foreign countries but in hearing rooms and bureaucratic offices where the future was decided by people who had never faced the challenges they imposed on others. As she shook hands with officers who had opposed her, Sarah realized that her real journey was just beginning. The trident on her uniform was not an ending, but a beginning, the start of a career where she would have to prove herself every day, where every mission would be scrutinized for evidence that integration was working or failing. But she was ready for that challenge. The young woman who had sat alone on the beach 6 months earlier, feeling defeated and broken, was gone forever. In her place stood Navy SEAL Sarah Martinez, ready to serve her country and pave the way for others who would follow. 2 years later, Sarah stood on the deck of the USS Hampton, watching the coastline of Somalia disappear into the pre-dawn darkness. Her assignment to SEAL Team 7 had been carefully managed high-visibility missions that showcased integration success, but nothing too dangerous that might result in the first female SEAL casualty. She had participated in training exercises, diplomatic security details, and humanitarian missions that allowed her to demonstrate competence without taking significant risks. Her teammates had gradually warmed to her presence, though she suspected their acceptance was more about her proven track record than genuine inclusion. She had saved lives during a hurricane relief operation in Puerto Rico, successfully completed advanced parachute training in Nevada, and earned commendations for her performance in joint exercises with Allied forces. But tonight was different. Intelligence had located a high-value target, an American aid worker named Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had been kidnapped 3 weeks earlier by a militant group operating in the coastal regions. The mission parameters were clear: extract the hostage, eliminate threats, and withdraw before dawn. It was exactly the kind of operation Sarah had trained for, but political sensitivities meant she would be staying aboard ship while the male members of her team conducted the rescue. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, the team leader, had delivered the news with obvious discomfort. "Martinez, you know this isn't my decision. Washington is concerned about optics if something goes wrong. The first female SEAL killed in action would create political problems that could affect the entire integration program." Sarah understood the logic, even as it frustrated her. Every female service member faced the same impossible standard: succeed perfectly, or risk closing doors for others. But understanding didn't make it easier to watch her teammates gear up for the mission she had trained alongside them to complete. The operation began at 0200 hours. Sarah monitored communications from the ship's command center as her team fast-roped from helicopters into the target compound. Initial reports were encouraging. They had achieved surprise, neutralized several guards, and located the building where the hostage was believed to be held. Then everything went wrong. Contact left. Multiple hostiles moving to surround the compound. The voice of Petty Officer Collins crackled through the radio, barely audible over gunfire. Team 7, this is Overwatch. We count at least 30 enemy fighters converging on your position. You need to extract now. Lieutenant Commander Jackson's voice remained calm despite the deteriorating situation. Negative, Overwatch. We haven't located the package yet. Continuing search. Sarah watched the tactical display as red dots representing enemy forces closed in on the small blue cluster that marked her teammates. The original intelligence had been wrong. This wasn't a small cell holding a hostage, but a major militant stronghold with dozens of fighters. Team 7. Drone surveillance shows vehicles approaching from the east. You're about to be completely surrounded. Abort mission and move to extraction point. Cannot comply. We've located the package, but she's wounded and unconscious. Moving to exfiltration will take longer than planned. Sarah felt her stomach clench as she realized what was happening. Her teammates were trapped with an unconscious hostage, surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces, with their escape route being cut off by incoming reinforcements. In 15 minutes, the mission would shift from rescue to recovery. The ship's captain, Commander Hayes, began preparing contingency plans. Air support was 20 minutes away, too long to be useful. A larger rescue force could be assembled, but it would take hours to coordinate and likely result in the hostage's death. The standard protocol was clear when special operations teams were compromised. They were expected to fight their way out or die trying. But Sarah noticed something others had missed. The compound was built near a series of sea caves that connected to the ocean through underwater passages she had studied during mission planning. The tunnels were too narrow and dangerous for the main team to navigate while carrying an unconscious hostage, but a single swimmer could potentially reach them from the water and provide an alternative escape route. Sir, she addressed Commander Hayes, I request permission to attempt water approach to the target. Absolutely not, Martinez. You're not authorized for combat operations. Sir, with respect, this isn't a combat operation. It's a rescue operation using maritime skills. That's exactly what I'm trained for. The argument that followed took precious minutes while her teammates fought for their lives. Sarah could hear the desperation creeping into their radio calls as ammunition ran low and enemy forces closed in. Dr. Walsh was unconscious and couldn't be moved quickly through the building-to-building fighting that would be necessary to reach the original extraction point. Finally, Commander Hayes made the decision that would define Sarah's entire career. Martinez, if you're going to do this, you're going alone and without official authorization. If something goes wrong, the Navy will disavow knowledge of your actions. Sarah was already pulling on her diving gear. Understood, sir. The swim to shore through choppy waters would have been challenging under the best circumstances. Doing it in darkness while carrying additional equipment, and knowing that her teammates' lives depended on her speed made it nearly impossible. But Sarah had always been most comfortable in the water, and desperation gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. She reached the cave system and began navigating the underwater passages, using only a small waterproof flashlight and her memory of the reconnaissance photos. The tunnels were narrow and filled with debris, forcing her to remove her breathing apparatus multiple times to squeeze through openings barely wider than her shoulders. After 20 minutes that felt like hours, she emerged in a flooded chamber beneath the compound. She could hear gunfire directly overhead, and her teammates' voices echoing through the building's foundation. Using hand signals and whispered radio calls, she guided them to her location just as enemy fighters broke through their defensive perimeter. How the hell did you get here, Martinez? Lieutenant Commander Jackson asked as they lowered the unconscious Dr. Walsh into the flooded chamber. I took a shortcut, Sarah replied, already moving to secure the hostage for underwater transport. What followed was the most technically challenging rescue operation in Sarah's career. She had to guide 6 fully equipped SEALs and an unconscious civilian through underwater passages that were barely navigable under ideal conditions. The tunnels flooded and drained with the tide, creating currents that could easily sweep away disoriented swimmers. One by one, Sarah led them through the maze of underwater caves, using her knowledge of ocean currents and cave diving techniques learned during advanced training. When Petty Officer Rodriguez panicked in the narrow passage and nearly drowned, she calmed him with voice commands and guided him to safety. When Dr. Walsh's breathing apparatus failed, Sarah shared her own air supply while navigating the most treacherous section of the tunnel system. 40 minutes after entering the caves, the entire team emerged in open water half a mile from the compound. The USS Hampton was waiting with small boats for pickup, and within an hour, they were safely aboard ship with Dr. Walsh receiving medical treatment for her injuries. The after-action report described the mission as a complete success, hostage recovered, no friendly casualties, and minimal enemy engagement. But Sarah knew that the real significance went far beyond a single rescue operation. For the first time since joining the SEALs, she had been judged purely on her performance under pressure, not on political considerations or gender integration policies. Dr. Walsh recovered fully from her injuries and later testified before Congress about the professionalism and skill of the team that had saved her life. She specifically mentioned the underwater navigation specialist, who had found an impossible route to safety when all conventional options had failed. Lieutenant Commander Jackson recommended Sarah for the Silver Star, writing in his citation, "Petty Officer Martinez demonstrated exceptional courage, technical skill, and leadership under extreme conditions. Her actions not only saved the lives of 6 team members, but ensured the successful completion of a critical hostage rescue mission. She embodies the highest traditions of naval special warfare." The medal ceremony was held at the Pentagon, with Sarah's parents and extended family in attendance. As the Secretary of the Navy pinned the Silver Star to her dress uniform, Sarah thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment, from the young woman who had been dismissed as a political experiment to a proven warrior who had earned respect through action rather than accommodation. Marcus Thompson was in the audience, now serving as an instructor at SEAL Training Command. He approached her after the ceremony with an expression she had never seen from him before: genuine respect. "Martinez," he said, extending his hand, "I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you. About women in the teams. What you did in Somalia. That's what being a SEAL is really about." Sarah shook his hand, feeling no triumph or vindication. Just a quiet satisfaction that the circle had finally closed. "We all did our jobs that night, Thompson. That's what teams do." But privately, she knew that everything had changed. The political restrictions that had limited her assignments were quietly lifted. Other women began applying for SEAL training, citing her example as proof that integration could work. Most importantly, she was no longer seen as an experiment or a symbol, but simply as a SEAL. Years later, when Sarah became the first woman to lead a SEAL team, she would often think back to that night in the waters off Somalia, not because it was the moment she proved herself. She had been proving herself every day since joining the Navy, but because it was the moment when others finally saw what she had always known, that courage, skill, and dedication had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with character. The young woman who had once sat alone on a beach, feeling defeated and forgotten, had become the warrior she was always meant to be. And in doing so, she had opened a door that would never close again, ensuring that future generations of women would find the path a little easier because she had walked it first.